everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Sharon, and this is a channel that is dedicated to all things related to narcissism. Several weeks ago, I had a nightmare. Now, I'm the type of person that never remembers their dreams, so it was significant that I even remembered this to begin with, but I think this dream or this nightmare was very fitting for some things that are happening in my real life. I was in New Hampshire, that's where I used to live. I was in New Hampshire and I was in a parking lot. Now, even though there was no ocean around me, there was in the stream, and I was aware that a tsunami was going to hit. So the only thing I could think to do was run to higher ground. So I ran across the street, I went to another parking lot, and then it was on top of me. The only thing I thought to do was hold my breath. So I sucked in my breath because I knew this huge wave was gonna wash over me. And this happened again and again and again. It would wash over me, I'd be able to breathe, and then it would come back. I can remember in the dream worrying about Joe and the kids, hoping that they were somewhere safe, but I knew there was literally nothing that I could do except hold my breath. And I think that's fitting for how we feel when we've endured a narcissistic situation. You know, for me, I was under the impression that once I left the narcissist, and for those of you that don't know, I left my ex 2 years ago. When I left the narcissist, this was when my freedom would begin. That here I was. I was able to start over and it was going to be smooth sailing. I guess I shouldn't say that. I wasn't that naive, but I did think that this was going to be the beginning of the good part of my life. What I didn't expect was so many symptoms. And one of the symptoms I have of PTSD is shock. 2 years later, what I really deal with, and I'm struggling with it right now, is I can't believe that this happened. I know it did. I can remember things that happened. I can remember being with my ex, but I cannot, I wake up in the morning and I can't believe that I'm here. How did this happen? You know, I can't believe I lost my house. I can't believe that my kids are older. I feel like in some ways I'm stuck in this limbo area. You know, when I first left my ex, it was non-stop drama. You know, I was going through the divorce. I was trying to protect my minor child. I was trying to get my household. I was trying to deal with living in a new place, getting a new job. There was so much in the immediate part of my life that I was dealing with. Now that a lot of that is done, all of a sudden, here I am, and I'm like in shock. Now, one little thing I'm going to tell you guys, just a little sneak peek for the future. I thought my ex was actually behind me. He's back. You guys are not going to believe what he's been pulling lately. I'm probably going to talk about that with Joe in the next Sharon and Joe show, so stay tuned. But I am divorced, so there's some of this has been behind me. So I've been able to kind of breathe a little bit, and now the shock hits. And that made me think of things that you don't expect. You don't know what's going to happen. When you're with the narcissist, how do you even know you're with a narcissist? How do you get to that point? You're living in crazy. And how do you get yourself safe? How do you even recognize what's happening? So I want to talk about that today. 5 signs that you have or are enduring narcissistic abuse. When you're with a narcissist, you don't know for a long time. You know, you think you're living a regular life. You aren't, but it's almost like, you know how they say like the frog, if you put it in the water and gradually turn it up, it doesn't know it's cooking. That's kind of how our life is. And then one day you're hit with you feel like you're going insane. What happened to my life? How is this possible? Before I knew narcissism, I would give serious thought to this. Why is my ex acting this way? I couldn't understand because it doesn't happen. Now, little things happen in the beginning. Later, and in retrospect, you can look back and say, oh yeah, that did happen. But at the time, it seems little or insignificant, or there's an excuse for it, or there's a logical explanation. As time goes on, that stops happening and you're just in full-blown crazy. And then at that point, you have been so affected that you don't even recognize that it's the narcissist who's wrong. Not that we're perfect, but I certainly, and I'm sure it's for you guys, I wasn't acting crazy in my entanglement in my relationship. I was trying to be a good wife. I was trying to live my life. And I kept thinking, why is he acting like this? Why is he doing these things? And I would try to change myself, thinking that would make the situation better. When all along, you're with crazy. The only thing you can do is put yourself together and get out. But what are some of the symptoms? What are some things that today I recognize were happening that maybe are happening to you right now? And maybe you can see this and think, oh my gosh, that's what this is. And maybe, hopefully, you can deal with this sooner than I did. So I'm going to talk about 5 signs you have or are enduring narcissistic abuse. The first one, you don't know how to stand up for yourself. You literally do not matter. I ended up becoming, I was with my ex for 20 years. The last few years, and this was earlier than that too, but it gradually happened. I became absolutely, completely insignificant. Everybody else, my ex, his family, my family, everybody else had a life. Everybody else, they had other people care about them. For me, nobody ever stood up for me. Nobody ever cared, or it seemed like that. I'm not trying to boo-hoo. I'm telling you, this is really how it was. I can remember one time my ex had a huge fight with his parents because we were going down to Florida to visit them. And I'm just going to try to make this brief so it's not this whole long story, but I was planning a trip with just my family. I decided actually, that maybe we should go over my ex's birthday so his parents could see him on his birthday, because we lived in New Hampshire and they lived in Florida. So I was really trying to be nice. I was trying to be a good daughter-in-law. I was really trying to do this, and then they could see the kids and that type of thing. We're going to go. I really wanted to go to Universal Studios because my kids and I are big Harry Potter fans. That was what we were going to do. And I thought for one day we could see them. Well, my in-laws took over the trip. They took it over. All of a sudden, they were doing it. They were bringing us. We were staying at their house, like all this stuff. It wasn't what it was supposed to be. So I told my husband at the time, I don't want your dad driving us everywhere. I want to have our own car. That was the only thing I asked. After the whole trip got taken over, I just wanted a rental car. His parents flipped out. And then my ex he could not stand up to his parents. This was a big problem we had in our relationship to begin with. He got so upset. He gave me a silent treatment over it. He destroyed an office over it. He was throwing computers. He was a mess because his parents were upset. And at one point, his father called him and said, "How can you do this to your mother? Your mother's so upset." And I'm thinking to myself, when I said it to my ex at the time, what about me? It was never, you're upsetting Sharon, or Sharon's upset, or Sharon, you took this whole trip away. I was completely insignificant. And that's what happens. You become less than nobody. You're at the bottom and you stay there, and nobody takes care of you, including yourself. You just accept it. This is how it is now. I was on the very bottom. And I'm sure there's like a give and take in this, but what I'm talking about today is when you are consistently at the bottom. Nobody cares about you. You don't care about yourself. You know it's weird or you don't like it, but you accept it. You don't stand up for yourself. The second one, now this is a hard one to accept, especially if you're still with the narcissist, but this isn't about perfection. It's about recognizing things, starting and recognizing things. When you're with a narcissist, it's a process. It just is. It sucks, but the sooner you understand these things, the better. You don't leave someone who abuses you. My ex abused me physically, emotionally, financially. He abused me. He struck me before. He's stolen from our children before. He was horrifically abusive mentally to me. This is somebody who wasn't good to me. And I didn't have enough self-confidence. I didn't care about myself enough to leave someone like that. And oftentimes, and I recommend you do this. This is a hard one. I understand that. I'm dealing with this now. Think about your children. If you have children, or if you don't have children, if you had a child. So I'm going to assume you have a child. If your child was being treated in their relationship the way you are, would you be okay with it? Joe and I have spoken about this so much. If, we have a daughter, well, she's my daughter, it's our daughter, we're raising our children together. We've talked before. If Paris was in an entanglement with somebody like we were involved with, we would be at her house in 5 minutes helping her pack up. My family encouraged me to stay with the ex. Same with Joe. Nobody cares how you're doing. Nobody cares how you feel. It just makes it like you don't matter. And you even feel that way about yourself. Why will you stay with somebody who abuses you? Just think about that. That is one of those things, you guys, that's so painful to consider. And so just consider that. Think about how you would feel if it was your child. The third one, and this was huge for me, you feel isolated. You're different than everybody else. You guys, Joe said to me one time, actually, let me just backtrack for a minute. When I was with my ex, I didn't have any friends. And I'm not telling you I had a few friends or not many. No friends, none. Now I understand that this is typical of a narcissistic entanglement. This was deliberate. He would always tell me people didn't like me or people were looking at me funny. And I actually became paranoid, like I had a complex. And it wasn't even like he ever said to me, I don't think you should go out with this person. I don't want you to have friends. It was, I did it myself because he would always make me feel like people didn't like me. After a while, I didn't want to initiate any friendships. When my children were small, people would call me up and want to go on, like, how when your kids are little, you go on the play date with them. That was such a fear of mine when somebody would want to go on a play date with me because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to. I was so afraid to be around other people. But at the same time, I would feel horrible that I felt like I was hurting my kids. So I would go on these play dates. I was probably awkward as hell and I never developed any friendships. And I used to feel so bad about it. So I had no friends. And I can remember Joe said to me one time, he said, oh, did you always struggle making friendships? Did you always have trouble with friends? And all of a sudden, no, I didn't. I had completely forgotten about it. It was almost like my life began and ended with the narcissist. That was my entire existence. I was with my ex for 20 years, but I'm more than 20 years old. And here I am, and I'm thinking, no, it was such a shock when he said that. So consider that, think about that. Do you feel isolated? And did you always feel this way? This is intentional with a narcissist. They want to control you. You guys, when you're with a narcissist, you go through these cycles where they must not know. They must not know. I believed that when I first found out about narcissism. I really thought that I was going to be able to tell my ex, listen, lovingly, I was going to do this. You're doing these things and they're hurting me. They're hurting us. And he was literally going to say, oh my gosh, you're so right. Please forgive me. No, it's deliberate. That's part of the acceptance with a narcissist. They know what they're doing, but you don't. So you're living in this world that you're not even participating in, and somebody else is controlling you and you don't recognize it. That's why it's so important to recognize these symptoms. Number 4, physical symptoms. When I was with my ex, I used to get these terrible migraines. I would get this migraine. Now it would start, I had one of those auras, so I would see these zigzaggy lines. And once that happened, I was done for 3 days. I would literally be in my bed for 3 days with a horrific migraine. It was so painful. I had to lay there in the dark, with a cold cloth on my head and just not moving. Every time I even went up to go pee, it would hurt so bad. Like this headache would be pounding. It was terrible. And this would happen. I would get a couple of these a month. It was really bad. They were debilitating for me. I also had anxiety. I was always anxious and nervous, depression. Some people, this didn't happen to me, but this actually happens to Joe. He gets stomach issues. He feels so sick, even now. Like he'll get, all of a sudden, he's like, oh, my stomach's really bothering me. It's anxiety. It's the physical symptoms of being with a narcissist. It's one of those things where so a narcissist has the problem, you have the symptoms. That's how it is. You suffer from someone else's illness. It's crazy. So this is another thing. Do you start getting sick? Are you sick a lot? What happens? Did it always happen to you? Migraines were a huge thing. And you want to know something, you guys? Since I left my ex, I have had one migraine, and it lasted a couple hours. I had the zigzag lines, and right away, if that happens, I take Advil and Tylenol at the exact same time and hope that I don't get the headache. It's worked. The migraine I got, I saw the zigzag line, so I knew it was a migraine. I never even got the headache. So since I left the ex, these physical symptoms have left, or that one has. I still deal with some anxiety and depression, but I think that's because it's like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm dealing with shock still. I'm still dealing with it. But these are all signs that you are or were with a narcissist. The 5th one, and this kind of coincides with one I said earlier, you don't recognize yourself. When Joe said to me that time, did you always have trouble making friends? And I thought, No. And it was such a shock for me to say that. No, I didn't. This is what happens. We don't remember our life prior to the narcissist. Or if we do, we're not thinking it in logical enough terms to say, wait a minute, I wasn't always like this. Why is this happening? Could there be a connection? So if you feel like that, you don't recognize yourself, you're not the person you used to be, or you don't like the way that you are now, or you feel like, what happened to me? Consider that. These are all signs that you are or were in a narcissistic entanglement. Now, I want to tell you, even though I'm telling you 2 years out, here I am dealing with shock, I try to tell you these things so you can maybe recognize them earlier. Joe and I are dealing with this, we're dealing with this. He's aware that I have this problem, and it is better. It's better since I was talking to Joe about it, and now it's manifesting in my dreams and I'm remembering it, but it's a real symptom and it's not a good feeling. None of this is good. None of these feelings are good. They're all horrible. It's a nightmare being involved with a narcissist. But I want to tell you, this is a hard one, but it's the truth. Getting out is worth it. Because if you're with a narcissist, the best case scenario that you can have, and this is horrible, your best case scenario is that you can somehow live an independent life from the narcissist, not rely on them for anything, not be too torn up by them, but you can kind of form your own life and move forward. That's the best that you can do, is stay with somebody that is disrespectful, rude, and abusive to you. So because you're afraid or you can't leave, and I get it. Like, this is not a video for this, but I get it if you really believe that you can't leave. And there are people that I understand completely are in a bad situation, and that really is the best that you can do, is try to live an independent life. Or you could have the strength, the emotional strength, the physical strength to do what you have to do to leave so that you have a chance at a real life. So that's it, you guys. I want to talk about, so here it is, the five signs that you've endured narcissistic abuse that you are. Please consider this. When you're with a narcissist, you are living in an alternative universe, but there is hope on the other side. You're so used to being involved in crazy world that you think there's nothing else outside of it, or it's too late, or you can't leave. Those are individual considerations, but it's so important, no matter what you ultimately decide to do, to recognize that you do have value. Your value isn't what the narcissist says. Your value is what God says. It's what you say. And I'm doing this. Joe's doing this. So, Joe and I, because we're doing it, I know other people can. We're not particularly strong, or we're not particularly wealthy, or we don't have anything that makes our situation different than anybody else. I advise you to consider whether you can leave. And if you have left, be aware that things keep happening. The shock could happen to you. There are real realities. There are repercussions being with a narcissist. So thank you so much for listening. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I will be back with Joe probably in a few days, and I'll see you guys in my shorts. Don't forget to watch my shorts. I've been putting my animals up. It's just a little fun thing I've been doing. So let me know what you think of those. Bye, everybody.